Chapter 1. Aliens have long been part of human storytelling, with encounters ranging from divine to terrifying. Yet one image has risen above all others in our collective imagination: the gray alien. Before the early 1960s, extraterrestrial visitors were typically described as human-like and often radiant. Tall beings with blonde hair resembled idealized versions of ourselves. Everything changed with Betty and Barney Hill's encounter in New Hampshire. Driving late at night, the couple reported being intercepted by a strange craft and experiencing a deeply traumatic abduction. Under hypnosis, they described small figures with massive heads and dark wraparound eyes. This was the first detailed account of what we now recognize as gray aliens. The Hill case attracted widespread attention. Civilian UFO groups investigated, the press covered it extensively, and even the U.S. Air Force's Project Blue Book examined their story. What made their report remarkable wasn't just the abduction claim, but the unprecedented description of the beings. Soon after, similar stories emerged from people who had never heard of the Hills. The archetype had taken root in our collective consciousness. Gray aliens share remarkably consistent characteristics. They stand between 3 and 4 feet tall, though some reports describe 6-foot versions. Their bodies are thin and hairless, with smooth skin ranging from pale to dark gray. They have oversized heads compared to spindly frames, with almost no nose, no ears, and a minimal mouth slit. Their most striking feature is their eyes. Large, almond-shaped and black, these eyes seem to communicate without sound. Witnesses describe a telepathic experience where thoughts and images are projected directly into their minds. This silent, penetrating communication creates a profoundly unsettling sensation. People reporting encounters often describe the being awake, yet completely paralyzed as these figures surround them. The Greys aren't cruel in a human sense, but they appear clinical and detached, observing with an emotional distance that feels deeply alien. By the 1970s and 80s, reports of gray abductions exploded. Ordinary people began reporting missing hours of time, with memories surfacing later under hypnosis. Writers like Bud Hopkins meticulously documented these accounts. Witnesses spoke of examination tables, tissue samples, and medical-like procedures. Dr. David Jacobs spent decades studying these experiences. His research suggested the Greys were conducting a vast genetic manipulation program aimed at preserving their own species using human DNA. For those who experienced these encounters, the trauma was profound and deeply personal. Some survivors suffered from nightmares and persistent feelings of being watched, yet others reported something more complex. A sense of connection suggesting the Greys were not just conducting experiments, but delivering a crucial message about humanity's critical moment in cosmic history. The origin of the Greys remains a mystery. Theories range widely. One popular explanation links them to the Zeta Reticuli star system, approximately 39 light-years away. This theory gained traction after Betty Hill described a star map aboard an alien craft, later corroborated by amateur astronomer Marjorie Fish. Alternative hypotheses are equally intriguing. Some propose the Greys are time travelers, future humans studying their ancestors. Others suggest they are interdimensional beings crossing between parallel realities. What makes these accounts compelling is their remarkable consistency. Thousands of witnesses across diverse cultures describe nearly identical beings. Skeptics argue this indicates cultural contamination, stories spreading through media exposure. Believers counter that media representations actually reflect genuine experiences. The Greys have become synonymous with alien encounters. They populate films, comics, and television shows. Their image is globally recognizable, stamped onto toys and emojis. Yet this iconic representation originated with frightened witnesses describing encounters they insisted were real. They remain the central archetype of alien contact, silent, efficient beings embodying both human fear and a sense of something greater watching us. Surgeons of the unknown, working with detached precision, their true motives forever unexplained. The 1950s marked the beginning of a fascinating chapter in UFO lore, the contactee era. UFO sightings dominated headlines, and individuals began stepping forward with extraordinary claims of face-to-face encounters with extraterrestrial beings. These early accounts stood in stark contrast to later abduction stories, focusing instead on messages of hope and global unity. Before the gray aliens became the predominant image of extraterrestrial visitors, another type of being captured public imagination, the Nordics, described as tall, radiant, and almost angelic. These beings offered a dramatically different vision of cosmic contact. They were not the small, menacing figures that would later populate abduction narratives. George Adamski became one of the most famous contactees of this period. In 1952, he claimed an encounter with a Venusian in the California desert, a being who embodied the Nordic archetype. Tall, with long blonde hair and striking blue eyes, this visitor allegedly communicated telepathically. The message was clear and urgent. Humanity was on a destructive path, and nuclear testing needed to cease. Physical descriptions of the Nordics were remarkably consistent. Standing between 6 and 7 feet tall, they possessed fair skin and hair ranging from golden to Hall, platinum blonde. Their eyes were particularly notable, described as vivid blue, violet, or piercingly bright. More than their appearance, witnesses emphasized an almost ethereal quality, speaking of beings who seemed to radiate calm simply through their presence. Unlike the emotionless gray aliens, Nordics were expressive. Their posture and gaze communicated intention and feeling. They were positioned not as invaders or experimenters, but as messengers of peace. Many reported encounters centered on warnings about humanity's potential for self-destruction, particularly regarding nuclear technology. The term Nordic emerged later, derived from their striking resemblance to Northern European physical characteristics. While skeptics dismissed these accounts, they nonetheless inspired numerous similar stories and represented a hopeful, even uplifting vision of potential extraterrestrial contact. Stories emerged of beings who warned against atomic testing. These encounters transcended geographical boundaries, connecting witnesses across continents. In the United States, Europe, and South America, people reported similar experiences with tall, radiant figures. The beings appeared in diverse settings, stepping out of silent craft in Italy and Sweden, offering environmental counsel in Brazil and Peru. Consistently described as having blonde hair, radiant eyes, and a calm yet authoritative demeanor. They seemed more like guardians than invaders. Their message was clear: humanity must live in harmony with itself and the planet. As narratives evolved in the 1970s and 80s, the Nordics' role transformed. No longer standalone peace messengers, they began appearing alongside the Greys during reported abduction scenarios. Some witnesses described them providing comfort during medical procedures, while others observed them as silent overseers whose true intentions remained enigmatic. Their origins sparked extensive speculation. Many contactees claimed they came from the Pleiades star cluster, over 400 light-years distant. Alternative theories proposed connections to Venus, Mars, or even suggested they might be advanced human time travelers. Some researchers interpreted them as symbolic representations of humanity's collective desire for benevolent guidance during turbulent periods. The Nordic archetype's power lies in its stark contrast with the Greys. Where Greys represent clinical detachment, Nordics embody warmth and hope. They symbolize spiritual potential rather than technological sterility. Yet, fundamental questions persist. Are they genuine extraterrestrial guides, or participants in a broader, more complex program? Culturally, they've become the quintessential good alien, appearing in numerous books and films, representing an idealized vision of extraterrestrial intelligence that resonates with human aspirations for understanding and transcendence. Some suggest these figures, resembling angelic beings, might have been behind many religious encounters throughout history. The entities described as Nordics could be the same beings seen in scripture and mythical tales as luminous figures. These Nordics represent a compelling alien archetype that offers an alternative narrative to the traumatic abduction experiences. They suggest guidance and potential kinship, yet uncertainty remains about their true nature. Are they protectors, observers, or participants in a complex plan beyond human comprehension? As understanding evolves, the narrative of alien contact shifts into murkier realms. While some visitors appear radiant and human-like, others emerge as monstrous and predatory. The reptilian beings represent a stark contrast to more benevolent archetypes. Unlike the detached Greys or the enigmatic Nordics, these entities embody something far more sinister. Characterized as tall, muscular, and scaled, they are often associated with control, secrecy, and systemic manipulation. Ancient civilizations across the globe referenced similar entities long before modern UFO narratives. Mesopotamian cultures depicted serpent gods, Mesoamerican legends spoke of feathered serpent deities, and African traditions like the Zulu described sky-dwelling reptilian beings who interfered with human development. These myths remained dormant for centuries, until the 20th century when they re-emerged within the context of extraterrestrial encounters. Witness accounts consistently describe reptilians as imposing creatures standing between 6 and 8 feet tall, with scaled skin ranging from green to brown. Their distinctive features include yellow or red eyes with slit-like pupils reminiscent of snakes, and muscular humanoid bodies that evoke a sense of potential threat. Nor reptilians stand out in UFO accounts with their distinctly alien appearance. Their faces feature elongated snouts, ridged brows, and sharp teeth, presenting a lizard-like demeanor that unsettles those who claim to have encountered them. Unlike other alien types, reptilians evoke a sense of immediate threat. Abductees consistently report an overwhelming sense of fear when describing these beings. Many suggest the reptilians possess a psychic ability to manipulate perception and instill terror even before any direct interaction. Some theorize they control smaller gray aliens, orchestrating abductions and experiments from behind the scenes. The 1990s saw a significant surge in reptilian mythology within UFO culture. Conspiracy theorists like David Icke proposed radical theories suggesting these beings had not just visited Earth, but actively infiltrated human power structures. According to these narratives, world leaders and monarchs might be either controlled by or secretly reptilian themselves, maintaining global control through manipulation and fear. Encounter descriptions vary widely. Some portray reptilians as cold, authoritarian figures overseeing medical procedures in underground facilities or alien spacecraft. Others describe them more as survival-driven warriors focused on dominance rather than secrecy. Their origins remain speculative, with some linking them to the star system Alpha Draconis, while others suggest they inhabit subterranean realms hidden beneath the Earth. The reptilian archetype resonates deeply with human psychology. Skeptics argue this fascination stems from evolutionary instincts, our historical need to recognize and avoid predatory threats like snakes and crocodiles. Whether viewed as extraterrestrial invaders or manifestations of primal fears, reptilians continue to captivate the imagination of UFO enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists alike. Reptilians have become a powerful archetype in modern mythology, embodying deep human fears about hidden control and manipulation. They represent the unsettling possibility that humanity's destiny might not be entirely its own. This concept appears in various cultural expressions, from conspiracy theories to science fiction. Films, television shows, and literature frequently feature reptilian beings with lizard-like characteristics or shape-shifting abilities. Shows like V and Doctor Who have popularized the idea of reptilian entities living secretly among humans. The mythology of reptilians goes beyond entertainment. Many individuals claim direct encounters, describing tall beings that instill profound fear. and assert control. These reports vary in detail, but consistently portray reptilians as potential rulers or predators. Some describe them as part of a hierarchical system with gray aliens as workers, while others view them as purely parasitic entities. The reptilian archetype has transcended UFO circles, becoming a cultural shorthand for paranoia about power and potential unseen manipulation. Whether viewed through the lens of ancient legends about serpent gods or modern conspiracy theories about government control, they symbolize a dark possibility that humanity might be unknowingly controlled or farmed by a force beyond comprehension. For believers, reptilians represent a hidden enemy. Skeptics see them as manifestations of unconscious cultural archetypes. Storytellers recognize them as perfect antagonists, powerful, terrifying, and omnipresent. These beings challenge our understanding of reality, suggesting that what we perceive might be far less significant than what remains unseen. They embody a primal fear of being watched, controlled, and potentially consumed by an intelligence far beyond our own. In accounts of alien abduction, the insectoids stand out as particularly unsettling beings. Unlike the clinical greys or radiant Nordics, these creatures appear truly alien. Emerging alongside abduction reports in the 1960s and 70s, they never gained the same widespread recognition as other extraterrestrial types. Witnesses consistently describe them as tall, thin beings resembling mantises with elongated limbs and large compound eyes. They are not mere background figures, but rather leaders who direct operations, supervise medical procedures, and guide smaller gray aliens. Towering over both humans and greys, these insectoids are often portrayed as observant, telepathic, and authoritative. Standing between 7 and 9 feet tall, they possess spindly frames that appear both fragile and imposing. Their triangular heads feature large, slanted eyes that convey depth and intelligence, typically described with skin in green, brown, or gray tones. Their appearance suggests a hardened exoskeleton. Communication for these beings is rarely verbal. Instead, they are said to project thoughts directly into the mind, a method that feels commanding yet not always hostile. Witnesses frequently report a clear hierarchical dynamic, with insectoids silently overseeing medical examinations and sample collections performed by greys. Some accounts suggest these beings play a crucial role in genetic experiments, potentially directing a hybrid program that blends human and alien DNA. Interestingly, abductee experiences vary widely. Some report an unexpected sense of calm in their presence, viewing them as wise scientists or philosophers with a broader vision. Others feel intense dread, sensing a superior intelligence that views humans as mere resources. Their involvement ranges from stepping forward to calm frightened abductees to ensuring procedures are carried out correctly. Researchers have proposed various theories about their role, with some suggesting they represent the upper tier of an alien hierarchy, with greys serving as their subordinates. From the perspective of some researchers, greys are not independent beings at all, but bioengineered tools controlled by insectoids that function as the minds behind a hive. The symbolism of their insect-like appearance runs deep, reflecting human fears about conformity, control, and the potential loss of individual identity. On Earth, insects inhabit highly structured societies where the colony's survival trumps individual significance. This parallel strikes a chord with fundamental human anxieties about autonomy and collective intelligence. Science fiction has long explored this theme, presenting insectoid beings as intelligent and purposeful entities utterly indifferent to human desires. Interestingly, some abductees describe their encounters differently. Instead of threatening overlords, they report moments of profound connection. These experiences include visions of ecological collapse, urgent warnings about humanity's destructive habits, and passionate pleas to protect the planet. In these accounts, insectoids appear more like concerned guardians attempting to guide humanity towards survival. Skeptics offer alternative explanations, suggesting these beings are psychological projections, The praying mantis, with its alien appearance and predatory nature, provides a natural template for the human subconscious to construct nightmarish imagery. Under hypnosis or altered states, the brain might blend familiar insect shapes with concepts of superior intelligence. Yet for those claiming direct encounters, the experience feels intensely real. Abductees consistently describe their interactions as more vivid and memorable than ordinary memories. The remarkable consistency of details, triangular heads, towering stature, a sense of profound authority, suggests something beyond mere imagination. Cultural representations further reinforce this archetype. Films and television have frequently depicted insectoid beings as alien overseers directing complex operations, subtly embedding the connection between extraterrestrial intelligence and hive-like social structures. These portrayals both reflect and potentially shape public perception of potential otherworldly encounters. Nordic encounters challenge our understanding of reality, weaving complex narratives between cultural perception and personal testimony. Among the diverse alien archetypes, the tall whites stand out as particularly unique. Unlike other reported beings, their story emerges directly from military encounters, primarily through the testimony of Charles James Hall, a former U.S. Air Force weather observer who claims repeated interactions in the Nevada desert during the 1960s. Hall's accounts describe beings that defy typical alien stereotypes. These creatures existed in a secretive coexistence with humans, operating from Range 4 of the Nellis Air Force Base. Standing between 6 and 7 feet tall, with some elders reaching over 8 feet, they possessed a striking appearance: extremely pale skin, fine white hair, and delicate features with narrow faces, high cheekbones, and large light-colored eyes. Their presence was characterized by nighttime movements across the desert landscape, often accompanied by human escorts. Hall claimed to have gradually earned their trust, observing their families and even interacting with their children. In his Millennial Hospitality series, he argued that the U.S. military had established a complex arrangement with the tall whites, permitting them to use Earth as a temporary way station during their space travels. These beings embodied the concept of the other, in its purest form, intelligent, powerful, and fundamentally different from humans. Some perceive them as wise teachers, while others view them as terrifying overseers. Universally, they leave an impression of encountering something far beyond human comprehension. Their tight-fitting environmental suits and pencil-shaped devices, capable of stunning or killing, further emphasized their technological sophistication and alien nature. More than just another alien archetype, the tall whites represent a mysterious intersection between military secrecy and extraterrestrial interaction. Their appearance might seem frail, but advanced technology made the tall whites formidable. Hall described their society as deeply protective, with adults potentially becoming aggressive if they sensed a threat to their personhood. Young. Their behavior reflected a strong emphasis on family bonds and hierarchical structure. Hall claimed they maintained advanced spacecraft in underground hangars, capable of maneuvers far beyond U.S. technological capabilities. Unlike other alien archetypes, these beings were uniquely tied to a military context. He reported they lived alongside U.S. personnel, with only a select few cleared personnel ever coming close to their facilities. Most airmen remained unaware of their presence. This secrecy, combined with potential cooperation, has fueled ongoing disclosure debates. If true, it would confirm not just the existence of extraterrestrials, but direct governmental interactions spanning decades. Skeptics challenge Hall's accounts, pointing out the lack of corroboration. No other airmen have stepped forward to confirm his story, and no physical evidence has emerged. Critics view his books as elaborate fiction rather than credible testimony, yet the intricate details of their society, personalities, and human interactions have sustained interest. Within UFO circles, even those doubting parts of his narrative acknowledge the potential for some truth. The tall whites occupy a unique position in alien mythology. They differ from reptilians, greys, Nordics, and ultraterrestrials. Instead, they appear as pragmatic travelers negotiating resources and trading technology while maintaining distance. In UFO culture, they symbolize government secrecy and hidden cooperation. They embody the unsettling possibility that extraordinary relationships might exist behind restricted military base fences. Their pale, elongated figures represent a chilling prospect that the most remarkable alien encounters might occur in plain sight on military land, rather than through covert abductions. Hall's accounts remain the foundational narrative for understanding this mysterious group. The media's portrayal of alien encounters often transforms real experiences into cultural caricatures. Take the Sutton family's extraordinary night in August 1955 near Hopkinsville, Kentucky. What began as a terrifying encounter became a cornerstone of extraterrestrial folklore. That evening, something remarkable happened at their farmhouse. A bright object streaked across the sky, followed by the emergence of strange beings from the surrounding woods. Family members and their guests witnessed figures unlike anything they'd ever seen before. Small, about 3 to 4 feet tall, these entities had oversized heads, glowing yellow eyes, and long, spindly arms that moved in an unnatural, almost floating manner. For hours, these mysterious creatures approached the house repeatedly. They peered into windows and brushed against walls while the family watched in absolute terror. Desperate and afraid, the Suttons eventually resorted to firing rifles at the beings. Yet the creatures seemed unaffected, retreating into darkness only to return again. When police arrived, the beings had vanished. What remained were bullet holes, scattered shells, and a family profoundly shaken. No signs of alcohol or hoax were detected. To the Suttons, this experience was undeniably real. However, the media transformed this encounter into something entirely different. Newspapers coined the phrase, "little green men," despite the family never describing the creatures as green. In reality, witnesses reported the beings had a metallic, almost silver appearance. This single event became a turning point in how alien encounters were perceived. The phrase quickly became a cultural punchline, used to dismiss UFO stories as silly or childish. Yet behind the cartoon stereotype lies a genuinely frightening experience that helped shape media narratives about extraterrestrial contact for generations to come. The Suan family's encounter would become more than just a personal trauma. It would become a cultural phenomenon. A single nigh of air transformed into a defining moment in UFO lore with the phrase Laman UFO lore with the phrase Laman UFO lore. Witnesses across different eras and regions have reported similar experiences. In the 1970s, South American farmers described humanoid figures with strange proportions. Korean pillows in 1951 claimed OC small men inside glowing objects. Brazilian reports echoed Hisuan's description of beings seemingly impervious to weapons. As his story spread, the image of aliens became deeply embedded in popular culture. Toy companies produced green alien figurines. Cartoons featured wide-eyed, grinning invaders. Even NASA scientists began joking about Martians. His stereotype grew so powerful anyone reporting a UFO risked being mocked or dismissed. Psychologists argue cultural imagery can significantly shape memory. When people encounter something extraordinary, their minds often draw from familiar archetypes. Eli Le Green Man phrase didn't merely mock witnesses. I fundamentally influenced how 4 generations would describe their experiences. The Suanon family remained unwavering. Throughout their lives, they consistently maintained how something genuinely extraordinary had occurred. Researchers who investigated the case found the family credible. They were no seeking an ancient and remained steadfast in their account. Skeptics have proposed alternative explanations, such as misidentified owls. Buhi family's description, beings with glowing eyes, floating movement, and apparent resistance of bullets, seems far more complex than a simple wildlife misunderstanding. Ultimately, the Hopkinsville incident stands as one of the most fascinating and well-documented cases in UFO history. It serves as a powerful reminder of how quickly a single night can transform from a personal experience a widespread cultural narrative. The media's power to transform mystery into ridicule highlights how a single phrase can create an entire cultural narrative. Beneath the mockery of little green men lies a genuine enigma. Reports from around the world echo descriptions of creatures seen in Kentucky in 1955, which were never satisfactorily explained. What began as a media invention has become one of the strangest puzzles in UFO lore. The journey leads into even more unsettling territory, encounters with hybrid beings that challenge our understanding of identity. These entities exist in a liminal space, neither fully alien nor entirely human. Among alien archetypes, hybrids cut closest to human experience. Unlike the cold grays, radiant Nordics, or predatory reptilians, hybrids occupy a complex middle ground. They appear part human, part alien, a concept that emerged strongly in the 1980s as abduction researchers noticed recurring patterns in testimonies. Women reported egg extractions, men described sperm removals, and many spoke of mysterious vanishing pregnancies. Bud Hopkins documented such cases, like Kathy Davis's experience in his book Intruders. She described having fetuses removed during abductions and later being shown children with both human and alien characteristics. Physical descriptions of hybrids vary widely. Some appear almost entirely human, with only subtle differences, unusually large eyes, thin bodies, or pale skin. Others look more distinctly alien, with oversized heads and grayish complexions. Abductees consistently describe them as emotionally distant, staring intensely but struggling to express feelings. Children shown to abductees are often portrayed as weak, needing care, or curious yet detached, as if trying to understand human behavior. The most disturbing element emerges when abductees are told these children are somehow their own. These encounters carry not just physical trauma, but profound psychological implications about reproduction, identity, and the potential reshaping of humanity itself. Abductees from different parts of the world, including the United Kingdom and Brazil, report being shown children with unmistakably alien features who seem vaguely connected to them. These encounters trigger deep emotional responses. Some individuals experience overwhelming grief at being separated from these children, while others feel their parental instincts have been manipulated as a form of control. The profound psychological impact is evident in how these moments strike at fundamental human connections. Researchers have proposed various theories about the purpose of these hybrid programs. One suggests that an alien race, potentially the Greys, are sterile after centuries of cloning and are attempting to blend their genetics with humans for survival. Another perspective, advanced by researcher David Jacobs, proposes that these hybrids might already be living among us, their differences subtle enough to go unnoticed. Harvard psychiatrist John Mack offered a more symbolic interpretation, viewing hybrids as an evolutionary bridge potentially helping humanity adapt to coming changes. The consistent theme across accounts involves reproductive procedures and encounters with beings that are neither fully human nor fully alien. Skeptics argue these stories could stem from psychological phenomena like sleep paralysis or false memories, noting that many accounts emerged after researchers like Hopkins and Jacobs began publicizing their work. However, proponents counter that the emotional depth and specific details transcend simple imagination. In popular culture, hybrid narratives symbolize anxieties about identity, appearing in science fiction and horror genres as metaphors for blurred boundaries. They represent simultaneously hope for evolution and fear of replacement. For those who claim direct experiences, however, these hybrids are intensely personal and real. Encounters with ultraterrestrials challenge everything we understand about alien contact. Unlike traditional accounts that place alien beings among distant stars, these entities seem to slip between our reality's boundaries, appearing as gods, angels, or monsters depending on the era. Some researchers argue that these beings are not extraterrestrial travelers at all, but something far more mysterious. The term ultraterrestrials suggests entities that exist beyond our standard understanding of space and dimension. While most alien stories point to specific star systems, like Zeta Reticuli for Greys or Draco for Reptilians, these beings appear fundamentally different. John Keel, an investigator of high strangeness in the 1960s, brought prominence to this concept. His research into the Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, exemplified this phenomenon. Witnesses reported not just a winged creature with glowing red eyes, but also strange lights, mysterious men in black, and inexplicable psychic disturbances. Keel concluded that these events were interconnected, representing intelligences that have always existed alongside humanity. These entities can apparently shift form, manipulate perception, and move between different realities. Their descriptions are rarely consistent. Witnesses speak of glowing orbs, shadowy figures, or transformative beings. Hybrid experiences also reflect this complexity. For some, these encounters are devastating, representing profound loss. For others, they carry a sense of mysterious destiny, as if participants were chosen for something larger than themselves. Hybrids occupy a unique space, neither fully alien nor entirely human, but something in between. This narrative suggests humanity might be changing not through traditional means like war or conquest, but through fundamental biological transformation. Whether these experiences represent literal programs or symbolic expressions of deep-seated fears remains uncertain. What's clear is that our understanding of reality might be far more fluid and mysterious than we previously imagined. Encounters with the unknown have long been part of human experience, taking different forms across cultures and times. Throughout history, people have reported strange beings that defy explanation, from medieval peasants seeing angels and demons to indigenous traditions describing star people and trickster spirits. These encounters often share remarkable similarities. Witnesses describe figures ranging from radiant light beings to grotesque shifting shapes. The same intelligence might appear differently depending on the observer's expectations, as a UFO, an angel, or a monster. Modern UFO abduction stories closely mirror older folklore tales of fairy encounters that left people dazed with lost time. Modern physics offers intriguing possibilities for understanding these phenomena. If other dimensions exist beyond the three we know, beings could potentially move between them, appearing and disappearing at will. Their movements would seem impossible to us, defying gravity, blinking in and out of sight, altering time itself. Specific locations have become famous for concentrated ultraterrestrial activity. The Mothman wave of the 1960s, Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, and the Hessdalen Lights in Norway all feature overlapping strange phenomena. UFOs, cryptid sightings, psychic disturbances, unexplained energy. These might not be separate mysteries, but different aspects of the same phenomenon. The intent behind these encounters remains controversial. Some researchers, like John Keel, view them as deliberate manipulations, tricksters who appear in forms designed to mislead, angels for the faithful, aliens for modern minds, monsters to frighten children. Others suggest a more benevolent motivation, entities attempting to expand human consciousness by using imagery appropriate to each era. Studying ultraterrestrials is challenging precisely because of their inconsistency. Physical evidence is rare, and what little emerges often disappears under scrutiny. Are they trying to guide humanity or simply deceive us? The mystery continues to intrigue researchers and witnesses alike. And witnesses, photographs blur. Objects dissolve into light. Unlike the Greys, who leave behind implants and scars, Ultraterrestrials create puzzles through patterns of synchronicity, fleeting impressions, and strange coincidences that resist scientific measurement. These beings stand at the edge of our understanding, defying simple categorization. They might be the same intelligences humanity has always encountered, merely wearing different masks across various cultural periods. Angels, demons, fairies, and aliens could all represent glimpses of a single shape-shifting intelligence. Their cultural influence runs deep. Books, documentaries, and paranormal explorations now seriously consider the idea that unidentified aerial phenomena might represent non-human intelligences beyond our current physical understanding. Even government and scientific discussions increasingly acknowledge this possibility. The reported beings form a staggering diversity: greys, Nordics, reptilians, hybrids, insectoid overseers, and ultra-terrestrial tricksters. Each archetype reveals something profound about human psychology and cosmic mystery. Their variations reflect not just potential extraterrestrial encounters, but our own anxieties, hopes, and deepest questions. Some entities embody specific human fears and fantasies. The greys represent cold detachment. Nordics promise peaceful contact. Reptilians symbolize control and domination. Insectoids hover like silent managers of an incomprehensible process. Hybrids blur the boundaries between human and alien, embodying our most visceral fears of intrusion. From a Kentucky farm's mistaken report of little green men to whispered military base encounters with pale, fragile beings, these stories weave a complex narrative. As our exploration nears its conclusion, we must ask, are these truly separate species visiting Earth, or different manifestations of a single unknown intelligence? The Pantheon of the unknown reveals as much about humanity as it does about the cosmos. Ultraracials blur the boundaries of our understanding, challenging traditional notions of space and origin. Their presence suggests intelligences that might emerge not from distant stars, but from dimensions interwoven with our own reality. These mysterious beings form a complex pantheon of the unknown. They evoke diverse emotional responses. Some trigger dread, others inspire awe, some deliver warnings, while some simply take without consent. Their persistence is remarkable, recurring across diverse landscapes, geographic, cultural, and perceptual. Witnesses span a broad spectrum: farmers, soldiers, children, pilots, each describing encounters with striking consistency. This uniformity raises profound questions. Are we experiencing multiple distinct races with unique agendas? Or are these encounters manifestations of a singular intelligence skillfully adapting its form to match human expectations? Perhaps these entities are more profound mirrors reflecting our deepest subconscious fears and desires, materializing during moments of altered perception. Each potential explanation carries weight, yet none provides complete satisfaction. What remains undeniable is the enduring nature of these narratives. Greys, Nordics, reptilians, insectoids, and other archetypal beings have thoroughly penetrated human culture. They populate books, films, conversations, t-shirts, and documentaries. They haunt abductees' nightmares and sensationalist headlines. Whether real or imagined, these beings have become integral to humanity's modern mythology, a pantheon representing our confrontation with the unknown. As governments gradually declassify archives and witnesses continue sharing extraordinary accounts, one fundamental question persists: who or what shares our reality? Until definitive answers emerge, this council of archetypes remains, watching, waiting, silently shaping our collective imagination and fears. The 1957 transformed the quiet, cold prairie roads around Loveland, Texas. What began as a typical evening in West Texas quickly became anything but ordinary. Pedro Salado, a farm worker driving with a friend on Highway 116, first reported the strange events. Around 11 p.m., he witnessed a bright flash streak across the sky before a massive glowing object descended toward the road. Salado described a torpedo-shaped craft about 200 feet long, emitting a bright blue light. As the object approached, his truck's engine sputtered and died, and the headlights cut out. Terrified, the two men jumped from their vehicle. They watched the object roar overhead with a rush of wind and heat before vanishing into the night. Immediately after its disappearance, the truck started again. Within an hour, another motorist experienced almost identical circumstances at nearly the same location. Their car died abruptly as a glowing object descended, illuminating the road before vanishing and allowing the vehicle to restart. Over the next 2 hours, the Loveland police station received at least 15 separate calls from drivers across the area. While descriptions varied slightly, some saw an egg-shaped object, others a cigar-shaped craft. All agreed on its brilliant, pulsating glow that bathed the landscape in an unnatural light. Sheriff Weir Clem, initially skeptical, decided to investigate personally. Driving into the area of repeated reports, he too saw a light flash across the sky and felt his engine falter. Though his car didn't completely stall, the experience deeply unsettled him. The pattern became undeniable. Ordinary people, farmers, truck drivers, young couples, and even the county sheriff were describing the same phenomenon within the same narrow time frame. What made this case particularly compelling was the consistent mechanical interference. Unlike most UFO sightings that rely solely on visual testimony, the Loveland events featured repeated, specific vehicle disruptions. Cars stalled only when the object was present and inexplicably restarted once it disappeared. These consistent physical effects gave the case unusual credibility and intrigue, transforming it from a simple sighting to a more complex scientific puzzle. The Leland UFO incident quickly became a cornerstone of unexplained aerial phenomena research. Within 2 days of the event, U.S. Air Force officials from Project Blue Book arrived to investigate. Multiple witnesses were interviewed, and reports were thoroughly examined. The Air Force's swift conclusion failed to satisfy those involved. They attributed the sightings to an electrical storm and ball lightning. However, witnesses strongly contested this explanation. There had been no storms that night, and ball lightning typically lasts only seconds, not long enough to stall multiple cars across miles of roadway. Witnesses consistently described a structured, solid object, not an atmospheric discharge. Far from quelling speculation, the official explanation fueled further controversy. Newspapers nationwide carried headlines about the Leland flying saucer, transforming the incident into one of the most famous UFO cases of the 1950s. Washington officials cited the event as a prime example of unexplained aerial activity, particularly noteworthy for its physical impact on machines. For Leland residents, the memory remained vivid and deeply personal. One witness described how the craft's glow turned the highway as bright as midday, casting long shadows across the prairie grass. Another found the sudden engine silence more terrifying than the object itself. The vulnerability of being stranded in darkness with an unknown presence overhead. Sheriff Clem, initially skeptical, never fully retracted his stance but admitted to witnessing something unusual. His testimony lent credibility to what might have been dismissed as mass hysteria. The consistency of multiple witness reports within a narrow time frame set this case apart from isolated sightings. Decades later, researchers continue to analyze the incident. Decades sue. The electromagnetic interference remains key evidence. While many UFO reports involve strange lights, few document such direct interaction with vehicles. The repeated engine stalling across different cars and witnesses suggests more than mere coincidence or imagination. Skeptics still argue for natural explanations but struggle to explain the concentration of incidents in one area on a single night. For those who experienced it, the Leland UFO was no abstract phenomenon. It was a night of fear, confusion, and awe, transforming familiar roads into a stage for something extraordinary. Drivers who might never have otherwise connected found themselves united by an inexplicable shared experience. An object descending from the sky, its engines dying, and the night lit by an otherworldly glow. The official record would ultimately label it as ball lightning, but those who witnessed the event knew something more profound had occurred. On that November 2nd night in 1957, the prairie highways of Texas became something other than ordinary. Motorists found themselves stopped, their vehicles stilled, forced to look upward in fear. No photographs or radar logs remained, only the testimony of frightened witnesses and the memory of dead engines on a dark road. The Levin case persists in the American imagination precisely because it felt tangible. This wasn't a distant light, but an event that directly disrupted people's lives, halting machines and challenging understanding. The combination of physical interference and widespread witness accounts makes it one of the most compelling UFO encounters ever recorded. For those brief hours, something unknown claimed the Texas plains, leaving behind only stalled engines, glowing skies, and unanswered mysteries. Similar encounters would echo this strangeness. In September 1976, Morocco's coastal radar station experienced its own inexplicable event. What began as routine monitoring of Atlantic approaches transformed into a bizarre Cold War incident. At 11:15 p.m., alarms blared at Quneitra Air Base. Mirage F-1 fighters roared from the runway, afterburners splitting the night as they raced toward intruders moving with impossible speed. The first radar return appeared just after 11 p.m. at a site south of Rabat. The signal was crisp and strong, unmistakably an aircraft. Yet its behavior defied all logic, moving at incredible speeds, then pausing almost motionless before darting forward again. Controllers checked their logs. No scheduled flights. No transponder codes. Within minutes, a second radar station confirmed the same mysterious object. Radar screens erupted with unexpected activity. Multiple unknown objects appeared, moving in patterns no known aircraft could replicate. Ground control operators watched in disbelief. 4 distinct echoes tracked across the screens, sometimes flying parallel, sometimes veering at impossible right angles. Each signal remained strong and steady. At Quneitra Air Base, the decision was swift. Scramble the fighters. Pilots raced to their Mirage F-1 jets, Morocco's pride, and NATO's standard interceptor. Afterburners ignited, illuminating the night sky. As the fighters climbed, ground control guided them toward the mysterious targets. Pilots initially expected Soviet reconnaissance planes or unregistered transports. What they encountered defied all expectations. One pilot reported a visual, a brilliant, unwavering light at high altitude. As he approached to intercept, the light instantly accelerated across the sky, vanishing in seconds. Yet radar continued tracking the object. Another pilot witnessed something equally bizarre. A seemingly stationary light suddenly split into 2. One half rocketed into the upper atmosphere, while the other plunged toward the ocean, disappearing completely from sight and radar. These were not normal evasive maneuvers. The movements were physics-defying, instantaneous and impossible. For nearly an hour, Moroccan fighters attempted intercept after intercept. Radar controllers directed them from one blip to another, but the intruders consistently slipped away. Sometimes the objects hung motionless like stars above the Atlantic. Other times they streaked across the sky at angles no jet could match. Fuel nearly depleted. Frustrated pilots returned without resolution. Whatever these objects were, they operated outside known aerodynamic principles. Late into the night at Quneitra, debriefings revealed consistent pilot accounts, brilliant lights, impossible accelerations, and objects capable of splitting into multiple forms. Radar operators had solid evidence, logs showing simultaneous strong returns from multiple stations. Morocco's strategic position in 1976 made this incident noteworthy. U.S. forces maintained communications facilities in the country, and NATO closely monitored the Atlantic corridor. When Moroccan officers compiled their reports, they quickly reached beyond national boundaries. U.S. advisors at Kenitra and Nouakchott received briefings, and American radar personnel acknowledged detecting similar anomalies that night. The Moroccan Air Force documented the event meticulously. Radar tapes were preserved, pilot statements recorded, and civilian sightings carefully noted. Anomalous aerial phenomena had been detected confirmed both by radar and visual observation. Intercept attempts failed. Objects departed without explanation. Civilian witnesses corroborated the military accounts. Fishermen off the Atlantic coast reported luminous objects darting across the horizon. Late-night drivers in Casablanca witnessed glowing shapes streaking silently overhead. Villagers along the coast spoke the next morning of white stars moving too fast to be planes. The reports aligned perfectly with radar tracks, lending credibility to the military documentation. Quiet followed the incident. No press releases emerged. No official denials were issued. Within Air Force circles, the story circulated as hushed rumor, with pilots whispering about lights that defied explanation. The file, marked unresolved, was discreetly forwarded to NATO contacts and archived. Years later, attempts to explain the events surfaced. Skeptics suggested radar errors, noting Morocco's Atlantic coast is prone to temperature inversions that can cause anomalous propagation. However, multiple independent stations had tracked the same solid return simultaneously, ruling out localized interference. Speculation about clandestine U.S. reconnaissance flights fell apart when no known platform in 1976 could split into two objects, accelerate into the ocean at supersonic speed. The pilots knew better. They recognized radar ghosts and understood conventional jet behavior. These objects were something else entirely. Here's a rewritten version of the text. On a September night in 1976, Morocco's skies hosted an encounter that defied explanation. Radar screens suddenly lit up with impossible returns, and fighters roared into the darkness. The Atlantic radar intrusion was part of a broader pattern emerging in the late 1970s. Luminous structured objects were repeatedly entering controlled airspace, tracked by radar and pursued by jets. This was no folklore for Moroccan pilots. There was a real operational mission. Armed and fueled, pilots scrambled into the air, chasing lights that seemed to split, climb into the heavens, and dive into the Atlantic. Civilian observers on the ground confirmed what military logs were recording. Pilots and radar operators alike were confronted with something they could not comprehend. Each intercept ended in frustration. Their most advanced equipment revealed solid evidence of something present, yet every pursuit concluded in complete futility. For Moroccan authorities, the only response was silence. The incident was not isolated. In the same year, similar events occurred over Tehran, where Iranian F-4 jets attempted to intercept luminous objects. These objects were consistently confirmed on radar, visually observed by pilots, and consistently outmaneuvered every pursuit attempt. Across NATO radar networks, unexplained returns were occasionally flagged, but often dismissed as clutter. Morocco's case was different, with comprehensive documentations from radar data, pilot observations, ground confirmations, and quiet international notifications. The objects came and went, revealing themselves briefly before vanishing as suddenly as they had appeared. They left behind only the absolute certainty that something extraordinary had traversed Moroccan airspace, beyond pursuit, beyond denial, and beyond understanding. This encounter stands today as one of the most compelling UFO cases in North Africa, a reminder that even in the most tightly monitored Cold War skies, there were phenomena that no pilot, no radar, and no command could explain. A group of witnesses experienced an encounter that would become one of Colombia's most enduring UFO mysteries. The events unfolded on a humid evening in 1974 at the Arara missionary station. Father Julio Barragan recalled how unusually still the night was, jungle insects silent, the sky crystal clear. As the missionary group finished their evening prayers, several stepped outside to enjoy the cool air. It was then they noticed an unusual light approaching low along the river, brighter and steadier than any boat lantern. Initially, they believed it might be a police patrol skiff monitoring river smuggling. However, the light rose above the tree line and hovered silently. What they saw was no ordinary watercraft. A glowing white object with a faint bluish edge settled about 100 meters away above a midstream sandbar. More missionaries were called to witness the strange phenomenon. The light gradually transformed into a disc-shaped craft with a dome, approximately 20 meters across, luminous yet seemingly solid. A wide beam of light projected downward onto the river, illuminating the water so brightly that fish could be seen darting beneath the surface. For nearly 5 minutes, the craft remained hovering silently, its beam sweeping slowly across the current. Without warning, the beam shifted toward the shore where the missionaries stood. Several of them experienced an intense wave of heat, dropping to the ground. One woman described the sensation as being uncomfortably close to a bonfire, but without smoke or flame. Communication equipment failed simultaneously. The mission's small diesel generator sputtered and stopped. Then, as abruptly as it appeared, the beam retracted. The object tilted upward and shot into the sky with incredible speed, vanishing into the night within seconds. Shaken but determined, the missionaries documented the entire event in their daily log. Father Barragon adamantly maintained they had witnessed a structured object, not a meteor or atmospheric illusion. The following morning, they contacted the fluvial police detachment downstream. Officers arrived by boat, interviewing witnesses and examining the area. While they found no physical debris, they noted several vegetation patches near the shore were scorched with browned and brittle leaves. The police report was forwarded to the regional command in Florencia, which subsequently alerted the Colombian Air Force. FAC, on monitoring UFO reports swept through river communities, with fishermen sharing extraordinary accounts near Bogota and over military bases in Meta. A startling incident unfolded that would become a compelling regional mystery. An Air Force team flew to Ararara. Conducting a thorough investigation, they interviewed missionaries, collected soil and vegetation samples, and examined the mission's generator, which displayed unexplained electrical damage. Officers appeared visibly confused by what they discovered. One reportedly stated, "This is not a helicopter, not a plane. I left no trace of entry or exit." Word spread quickly among local communities. Fishermen described strange occurrences along the Cacata. One missionary recounted watching an orb of light rising directly from the water, hovering briefly before vanishing into the forest. Another shared how his canoe was rocked by waves when a glowing craft passed overhead. By late 1974, the encounter had become a significant regional rumor. Local newspapers in Caqueta printed small stories about luces mysteriosas, citing unnamed police sources who confirmed unusual reports. The national press remained largely disinterested, distracted by Colombia's political turbulence. Skeptics attempted to provide alternative explanations. Some suggested misidentification of a military aircraft, though no scheduled flights existed in the area. Others proposed ball lightning, but clear skies and prolonged hovering contradicted this theory. The electrical interference, scorched vegetation, and consistent witness testimony made such dismisses unconvincing. The experience profoundly affected the missionaries. Several refused to walk alone near the river for months. They wrote letters describing their fear, not just of the unknown craft, but of its unsettling silence, precision, and apparent awareness. Years later, UFO researchers found that survivor interviews remained remarkably consistent. Witnesses continued to describe the same disk, dome, and sweeping beam. Flual police logs from 1974 confirmed an official report had been filed. While the Air Force never released its conclusions, Researchers considered this one of Colombia's strongest close encounter cases. A particular event reveals its significance. Missionaries, police officers, and Air Force personnel all kept detailed written records. These layers of documentation distinguished the account from mere hearsay or folklore. No photographs exist, but the written record river that night. While Ara is now celebrated for its dramatic canyon and rich biodiversity, the UFO story persists among locals. River elders vividly recall the night when light descended on the water. Radios fell silent, and even the jungle seemed to pause. For them, this was no legend, but a lived reality etched into memory as deeply as the river's own currents. The Aurora Kawara River encounter defies explanation. Military technology of that era could not produce a craft capable of hovering silently, projecting heat without flame, disabling generators, and then accelerating skyward in seconds. For missionaries, police, and Air Force officers who examined the site, the event was undeniable. Something structured and deliberate had appeared above the Caqueta that night. This case sits within Colombia's broader tapestry of UFO reports: pilots chased by lights over Bogotá, strange objects tracked over Meta, and mysterious craft deep in the Amazon. Yet the Aurora Kawara encounter stands apart, not just for its vivid witness accounts, but for the way it drew together church, police, and military institutions, all converging on a truth they could not explain. The Zanfrede abductions unfolded on December 6, 1978. In Trillia, Italy, a Fiat's headlights cut through dense mountain fog, illuminating narrow asphalted roads and frozen stone walls. Midnight approached in the deserted village, the road to the remote Villa Casanestra empty, except for Pier Fortunato, Zanfreda's security patrol vehicle. Inside the vehicle, Zanfreda gripped the wheel unusually tight, sensing something amiss. Upon parking and stepping out, his boots sank into damp soil. Flashlights cut through darkness as a strange pressure built in his ears, as if the atmosphere were responding to an unseen presence. His breath escaped in short, nervous bursts while approaching the villa grounds. Suddenly, the silence shattered. A quick, massive movement stirred the surroundings. On a dark night near Hedros, Zanfreda's patrol suddenly stopped. Something caught his light that shouldn't have been there. Towering figures nearly 3 meters tall stood motionless in the bushes, their skin scaled and greenish, eyes glowing yellow, wearing bulky metallic suits that hissed faintly. Before he could draw his pistol, a searing white light enveloped him. He screamed. The car radio crackled to life. "Zanfreda, come in." Only static answered. Then a chilling transmission. "They're here." When the Carabinieri found him an hour later, his patrol car's engine was still running. Zanfreda sat inside, shaking and unable to speak, his eyes wide with terror. Burn marks marred his uniform, and his untouched pistol remained in its holster. He had no memory of retrieving it. At 1:10 a.m., one of Europe's most documented alien abduction cases began. Zanfreda would later recount an extraordinary story. A blinding light lifting him into a craft surrounded by enormous reptilian beings communicating telepathically. They claimed to be from the third galaxy, orbiting Tayeti, watching and studying humanity. He had been chosen. Media erupted. Italian newspapers blazed with headlines about the terrified security guard's alien encounter. While many dismissed his claims, the Carabinieri's official report detailed emotional shock, physical traces, and a consistent account, enough to attract researchers, psychologists, and skeptics. Mauro Moretti from Milan's International Center of Medical Hypnosis guided Zanfreda through recorded hypnosis sessions. Under hypnosis, he described multiple abductions, providing detailed and unwavering accounts. Glowing panels, alien machinery, and a stark warning emerged. Humans were not ready for contact. The beings were described as massive, at least 9 feet tall, with bumpy skin, clawed hands, and penetrating glowing eyes. Their technology defied comprehension, their demeanor clinical. In one emotional session, Zanfretta broke down, recounting a particularly haunting interaction with one of the creatures. In the winter of 1979, a strange incident unfolded involving a guard named Zanfretta. His colleagues had inserted a clear sphere into his skull, tasking him with monitoring something mysterious. Zanfretta's experiences went far beyond simple observation. Throughout 1979 and 1980, he repeatedly disappeared from his patrol route, only to be discovered hours later in distant locations. Each time he was dazed, drenched in sweat, and suffering from complete memory loss. During one particularly bizarre incident, other guards witnessed a peculiar light shooting into the sky just before Zanfretta's radio went silent. Investigators meticulously documented these events. Soil samples from the original site showed compression and slight scorching, while semicircular indentations in the ground suggested the presence of an extremely heavy object. Local villagers corroborated these strange occurrences, reporting unusual lights in the sky. Carlo Rosi, a local mechanic, noted that his dog became unusually agitated, refusing to approach the wooded area near the villa for days. What made Zanfretta's account particularly compelling was his reluctance to seek attention. He consistently turned down book offers and media appearances. When he finally appeared on Italian television in the mid-1880s, his discomfort was evident. His hands trembled and his eyes darted nervously as he recounted his story. Journalist Rino D. Stefano spent over a decade investigating the case. After numerous interviews with Zanfretta reviewing police files, hypnosis tapes, and witness statements, Stefano became convinced that Zanfretta genuinely believed his experiences and had suffered tremendously as a result. Skeptics suggested Zanfretta might have experienced hallucinations or psychological trauma, though extensive mental health evaluations found no signs of psychosis. Others believed his account aligned too closely with emerging global alien abduction narratives to be dismissed as mere coincidence. In Toria, a small town nestled among quiet hills and winding mountain roads, the memory of that strange winter night persists. A small plaque near the villa now marks the alleged landing site, not as definitive proof, but as a testament to one man's unwavering testimony. Since Zanfretta, though now retired and living in obscurity, has never wavered from his original account. Even decades later, in a rare interview, he spoke softly about that night. "I didn't want this. I still wish it had never happened, but I can't forget what I saw, and I never will." The case remains unresolved, both in official records and in the public consciousness. No one has successfully challenged Zanfretta's testimony. This unverified yet unrefuted account might be the most unsettling aspect of the story. If his claims hold true, it suggests we are not alone, and that something or someone chose a solitary night watchman in a mountain village to deliver this profound message. On a seemingly ordinary September evening in 1976, the Longford Bridge over the Coventry Canal in Warwickshire became the site of an extraordinary encounter. At the time, it was an unremarkable crossing lined with hedges, dimly lit by street lamps, with the soft hum of late-night traffic on the nearby A44. Michael Hughes, a 27-year-old delivery driver from Bedworth, was returning home after completing his final delivery in Knighton. The roads were clear, and a lingering dampness from an earlier shower hung in the cool air. As he approached the turnoff toward Longford Bridge, an unusual glow caught his attention. It wasn't the sharp glare of headlights, but a softer light suspended above the canal. Initially, Hughes assumed it was a reflection from a nearby industrial yard. However, as he drew closer, the light appeared self-contained with no visible ground source. He pulled his van to the side of the road just before the bridge and stepped out. The light hovered approximately 30 feet above the water, a steady, bright white with a faint bluish edge. Its shape was initially hard to discern until it tilted slightly, revealing a disc-like form no larger than a small car. A diffuse light column stretched downward toward the water's surface, rippling like a heat haze. Hughes later described the canal water beneath the column as shimmering unnaturally, despite the night stillness. For several seconds, everything remained motionless. Suddenly, without sound, the object glided silently across the canal, passing directly overhead. A tingling pressure filled the air, not painful but enough to raise the hair on his arms. While Hughes stood transfixed, another vehicle approached from the opposite direction. On a night that would soon become unforgettable, Jean Turner slowed her car and locked eyes with Hughes. The disc hovered near the eastern bank, pausing briefly above willow trees. Before rising vertically, Hughes watched as it climbed to around 200 feet and then accelerated away, an angle, vanishing southward in under 5 seconds. Unsettled by the encounter, Hughes returned home and struggled to sleep. The next morning, he called the local police station, not to file a formal report, but to ask if anyone else had witnessed unusual lights. Surprisingly, the desk sergeant didn't dismiss his inquiry. Instead, he revealed that a patrol car in nearby X-Hall had also reported an aerial light moving too fast and erratically to be a conventional aircraft. This conversation led to a detailed interview with the uniformed officer. The officer noted that the Ministry of Defense occasionally reviewed such reports, though feedback was rare. Weeks later, through a contact at the Coventry Telegraph, Hughes learned that Jean Turner, the woman from the other car, had given an almost identical account to the newspaper. Turner described the object as hanging silently in the air, showing no awareness of their presence before vanishing instantly. The report was never published. Instead, it was quietly forwarded to RAF Cosford, which handled regional aerial incident inquiries. From that point, the trail seemed to go cold. Hughes continued his work, occasionally sharing the story with friends, but never pursuing it further. Turner appeared even more reluctant to discuss the incident publicly. However, behind the scenes, the Longford Bridge case was documented in a series of internal MoB memos. Decades later, Freedom of Information Act requests revealed heavily redacted documents. These pages confirmed an unidentified aerial phenomenon reported by 2 independent civilian witnesses that night. The documents also hinted at possible correlations with 2 additional visual reports from the West Midlands, though details remained scarce. One notable paragraph stood out: no radar confirmation from RAF Nidus Head or RAF Bulmer. The phenomenon was observed at close range, exhibiting stable hover characteristics that defied conventional explanation. During the mid-1970s, British UFO reports were frequent, though most never reached public awareness. The Ministry of Defense maintained a Defense Intelligence Staff UFO desk, a small office responsible for collecting and cataloging reports from various sources, including police RAF stations and occasional public submissions. While many reports were quickly dismissed as conventional phenomena, certain cases warranted deeper investigation. Those involving multiple witnesses, structured craft, or unusual maneuvers received more detailed logging. RAF Cayford served not just as a training base, but also as a regional hub for aerial incident evaluation. The Longford Bridge sighting was particularly intriguing due to its location near Coventry's industrial perimeter, an area with several active defense contractors. The site also sat along a low-altitude approach path occasionally used by military helicopters. Notably, both witnesses insisted the object produced no sound, not even the faintest hint of a rotor blades. When a sighting was considered credible but lacked immediate explanation, Cosford's protocol was to assess its potential defense significance. Essentially, this meant determining whether the object might represent foreign aircraft or technology. If no threat was identified, the case was generally filed without follow-up. The lack of radar confirmation from major stations like Nidus Head and Bulmer meant the MOD would classify the sighting as having no defense significance. This classification didn't imply the event didn't happen, but simply that it posed no identifiable military risk. The day after the sighting, 2 plainclothes personnel visited the site. Hughes, passing the bridge on his way to work, noticed them standing by the canal with measuring equipment. One appeared to be taking readings near the water line, while the other sketched the bridge's structure. They did not approach him, and he did not stop. Locals later recalled that for several nights afterward, a small patrol boat operated in that stretch of the canal, though no one could definitively link it to the incident. Such discreet site visits were not unusual. The MOD occasionally dispatched small field teams to check for physical traces, soil disturbance, magnetic interference, or radiation anomalies. The incident remained filed as unexplained, with a vertical ascent and no detectable acoustic signature, defying any meteorological explanation. Not by the early 2000s, the Longford Bridge incident had faded from public memory. When the Ministry of Defence files were opened under the UK's Freedom of Information Act, the case barely registered beyond local circles. Yet for those familiar with British close encounters of the 1970s, its unique characteristics stood out. The team investigating such reports in that era used portable equipment like Geiger counters, compasses for magnetic deviation, and Polaroid cameras to document sites. Any data collected at Longford Bridge, however, never appeared in the declassified documents. The final page of the file, dated late October 1976, revealed intriguing details. It noted high witness credibility, acknowledged the object's inexplicable behavior, and concluded no further investigation was necessary. The incident represented a classic close encounter, low-altitude observation, multiple witnesses, and behavior defying conventional explanation. Today, the bridge remains unchanged, a modest crossing over still water with steady traffic. No plaque commemorates the event. No local legend persists. For 2 drivers on a quiet September night in 1976, it was something entirely different, a setting for an encounter quietly filed away. For Hughes and Turner, this wasn't just paperwork. It was a direct, undeniable moment. A bright, silent object, hovering impossibly, moving in ways no known aircraft could. Decades later, the government file spoke more through its omissions than its revelations, another unresolved fragment in Britain's understated UFO history. The pattern would repeat elsewhere. In Vilvoorde, Belgium, just past 2 a.m. on June 18, 1990, officers Roland and Mark responded to a farmer's urgent call about strange lights in the fields. While Belgium had experienced a wave of such sightings since 1989, rendering most officers dismissive, this caller's insistence and evident distress prompted investigation. Their patrol car's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing but dewy grass and thick hedges. Another enigmatic encounter was about to unfold. Then Roland pointed to something unusual hovering about 150 meters from the road, just above the field. A black triangular craft hung motionless, distinguished by its unique characteristics. No noise, no exhaust, no blinking lights. Instead, 3 steady red-orange lights marked each corner of the triangle, with a single, larger white light centered in the middle. Mark killed the car engine. The surrounding environment was eerily still. No animals stirred, no trees rustled. As they stepped out, both officers would later testify that what they were about to witness completely defied their understanding of known aircraft. The object began rotating slowly, its lights maintaining a precise geometric formation. Without warning, it started moving westward, low, silent, and accelerating with a deliberate purpose. Roland grabbed the police radio and called in the sighting. The Vilvoorde Central dispatcher hesitated briefly before instructing them to maintain visual contact, report any changes. The officers pursued in their vehicle, trying to track its path along a parallel road. But the object moved increasingly faster. They watched as it lifted higher, angling upward while maintaining its triangular shape. Then, in an instant, it shot into the sky. No sound, no sonic boom. just a blur of incredible acceleration until the lights vanished completely. The two men sat in stunned silence, exchanging no words for several moments. When they returned to headquarters, they filed a written report with utmost professionalism. Both officers provided nearly identical descriptions, using consistent terms like triangular, silent, and hovering. Crucially, neither attempted to theorize about the object's nature. They simply reported exactly what they observed. Their supervisor forwarded the report to John Darmy, who was collecting data on similar sightings as part of a national inquiry, unofficially known as the Belgian UFO wave. Darmy subsequently passed the report to the Belgian Air Force. In the following days, investigators thoroughly examined local radar logs. They discovered something remarkable. Radar installations had indeed picked up an anomalous object matching the officers' reported time and location. The object traveled at low altitude before vanishing from radar within seconds. No flight plans had been filed and no known aircraft were operating in that corridor at the time. This detail added significant weight to the officers' extraordinary account. No enforcement officials corroborated the unusual encounter. During the Belgian UFO wave that began in late 1989, hundreds of reports emerged, but few came directly from police officers on active patrol. This particular sighting was different. The characteristics aligned with dozens of other reports across Belgium between 1989 and 1991. A triangular shape, silent operation, and hovering behavior defined these encounters. Some previous incidents involved radar visual contacts, leading to dramatic intercept missions where Belgian FDAG targets. These jets were consistently outmaneuvered, losing track as objects climbed or dropped at impossible speeds. One notable event in March saw the Belgian Air Force tracking multiple unknowns on radar, even capturing parts of the chase through infrared imaging. Despite a detailed public press conference featuring radar prints and pilot statements, no definitive identification was made. SOBEP's investigators interviewed the two officers independently in the Vilvoorde case. Their testimonies remained consistent with no hypnosis or suggestive techniques used. The organization noted the officers had no history of hoaxing or attention-seeking behavior. They were considered professional and trustworthy. Civilians had captured photos and videos of large dark triangles with tip lights during the UFO wave in various Belgian locations. However, the Vilvo event produced only written reports and personal testimonies from the two officers. Skeptics later suggested the sightings might be misidentified aircraft, potentially stealth planes tested by NATO or the US military. Belgian Air Force officials firmly denied such claims, stating no foreign aircraft had been granted permission to fly in Belgian airspace without notification, especially not black triangle-shaped craft hovering over towns. The most perplexing aspect remained the complete absence of sound. No noise, no downdraft, just slow, deliberate movement followed by sudden vertical acceleration that defied conventional explanation. Military personnel witnessed phenomena that could not be explained by known technology. Yet, the IBA-10 authorities found no evidence of threat or hostility. The internal summary by the Belgian military was notably transparent. Two officers from Vilvoorde encountered these mysterious craft during their patrols. They maintained a strict distance from media speculation, never giving interviews or seeking attention. After their experience, they continued their service and eventually retired with honors, remaining consistent in their account when later contacted by researchers. By the mid-1990s, the government inquiry concluded without definitive answers. The wave of sightings gradually diminished, but the files remained. Military and civilian authorities had been remarkably open, holding joint press conferences and sharing radar data with investigators. The mystery of the black triangles continues to intrigue. Questions linger about their frequent appearances over Belgian skies and their brief, intense period of activity. Were these experimental aircraft from an unknown source, or something operating beyond human comprehension? One of the most compelling incidents occurred in Ilkley Moor, Yorkshire. On a bitterly cold morning in December 1987, Philip Spencer, a former police officer turned security guard, had taken the morning off to visit his father-in-law. Known for his rationality and serious demeanor, Spencer was not someone typically associated with extraordinary claims. That morning, he set out with a camera and compass, hoping to capture the winter landscape. The fog hung low, frost etched the grass, and silence blanketed the Yorkshire hills. Visibility was poor, extending only a few hundred feet. What Spencer claimed to have encountered that day would challenge his reputation for level-headedness and rational thinking. The Vilvoorde sighting remains one of the most well-documented events of the Belgian UFO wave, a testament to the enduring mystery that continues to challenge our understanding of the unexplained. Nada Spencer's journey was meant to be straightforward, a simple trek across the moor and catching a train to his father-in-law's house. But within minutes, everything changed dramatically. Cresting a small ridge, he spotted something strange on the path ahead. A figure about 4 feet tall stood hunched, with an oversized head and elongated limbs. Initially, he thought it might be a child, but when it turned toward him, he realized something was terribly wrong. Its skin was a pale greenish gray, and its face was decidedly not human. Large black eyes dominated a small, featureless mouth. No nose was visible. The creature moved with startling speed, and Spencer's instinct was to raise his camera and capture a photo. Instantly, the figure darted up a hillside and vanished over the ridge. Stunned, Spencer sprinted after it, reaching the top seconds later. But the figure was gone. A large metallic craft hovered silently in the valley below, emitting a faint blue glow. It lifted slowly, tilted to one side, and then disappeared into the fog. Without a sound or wind disturbance, disoriented, Spencer checked his compass. The needle spun wildly, unable to find north. His watch had stopped. He wasn't sure how much time had passed, though it felt like mere minutes. Shaken, he hurried across the moor and caught a later train than planned. At his father-in-law's home, he was shocked to discover nearly 2 hours had unaccounted for. In the following days, he remained haunted by the experience. When he developed the film, he found a grainy, out-of-focus photograph that nonetheless captured something extraordinary. A short, humanoid figure with a bulbous head stood mid-stride on a gravel path. Skeptics suggested it was a person in a suit or a hoax, but multiple photographic analysis, labs, including Kodak, confirmed the image's authenticity. The British UFO Research Association became intrigued. They arranged for Spencer to undergo hypnotic regression, hoping to uncover details about the missing time. The results were deeply unsettling. Spencer's encounter on Ilkley Moor became a significant UFO case in the UK, rooted in an experience that defied conventional explanation. Under hypnosis, he recounted a bewildering sequence of events. After taking a photograph and cresting a hill, he was enveloped by a bright light and lifted into the air. He found himself paralyzed and then transported to a sterile metallic room where beings conducted a thorough examination, drawing blood, inspecting his eyes, and testing his limbs. During this examination, images flickered on the walls, scenes of war, environmental devastation, and then serene landscapes. Subsequently, he was returned to the moor, disoriented and confused, as if emerging from a dream. While many dismissed the hypnosis results as suggestive imagination, others noted the striking similarities with global abductee reports. Spencer himself never sought publicity or financial gain. He avoided media attention and requested anonymity for years, with his identity only becoming public long after the original incident. The photograph he took remains one of the most controversial pieces of UFO evidence in the UK. Despite decades of scrutiny and debate, no one has definitively proven or disproved its authenticity. Some argue it's merely a light trick or misinterpreted landscape, while others see it as compelling evidence. Ilkley Moor itself has a rich history of unexplained phenomena. Local residents had long whispered about strange lights, disappearing livestock, and mysterious nighttime sounds. Weeks before Spencer's encounter, several residents reported unusual aerial activities, including a witness who described a glowing sphere hovering silently above her house. These incidents remained localized until Spencer's account brought them to broader attention. What distinguished this case was Spencer himself. A law enforcement professional with no prior interest in UFOs, he was not a typical enthusiast. Those who interviewed him emphasized his consistent narrative, obvious discomfort with attention, and steadfast refusal to embellish. His account never wavered. Years later, Spencer distanced himself from the experience. He felt the encounter had unnaturally defined his life. In a rare conversation with a journalist, he simply stated, "I saw something. I know what I saw. And it wasn't a man in a suit. It wasn't a helicopter or a plane. I wish I hadn't seen it." Today, Ilkley Moor remains unchanged, holding its secrets close. Tanna Island's Mount Yasur has been a beacon of geological wonder for centuries, its continuous eruptions earning it the nickname the Lighthouse of the Pacific. But something strange began happening in the early 2000s that caught the attention of researchers and tourists alike. Luminous spheres, glowing orbs, started appearing in and around the volcano's crater. Witnesses described these mysterious phenomena hovering above the molten landscape, sometimes entering the volcanic mouth and exiting completely unharmed. Initially dismissed as atmospheric anomalies or camera glitches, the sightings became increasingly difficult to ignore. Locals had a different perspective. For generations, they had viewed these orbs as manifestations of ancestral sky spirits, a natural part of their cultural understanding. Tourists from around the world, France, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, began reporting similar experiences. One particularly memorable account occurred in 2007 when Danish backpacker Lars Jensen was filming the volcano's eruptions. Accompanied by a local guide named Jonah, Lars captured something extraordinary. A silent, bluish-white spherical light drifted upward from the crater, hovering momentarily before zipping out of frame at an impossibly fast speed. When Lars glanced at Jonah, bewildered, the guide simply said, Lars uploaded the clip to an obscure travel blog, where it languished in digital anonymity until researchers began taking a serious interest in the phenomena around 2013. An earlier incident in 2003 involved a French honeymooning couple, Marie and Philippe Dupont, who witnessed two luminous spheres emerging from an ash cloud, hanging silently in the sky like watchful eyes. For over 3 decades, these unexplained occurrences have continued, transforming Tanna Island from a mere geological curiosity into a site of profound mystery. They hovered for a minute and then rose straight up, disappearing behind a starry curtain. Their camera caught only a faint trace of light, but the memory remained vivid for Marie, who recalled the moment years later in a travel documentary. Amateur geologists like Dr. Documentary Greg Hammond started paying attention. By 2009, he had made multiple trips to Tanna to document geological data, but became increasingly fascinated by the orbs. In an interview, he expressed his bewilderment. There's no logical explanation for a sphere of light entering an erupting volcano and not disintegrating. If this is a naturally occurring plasma or ball lightning, it's like nothing we've seen. Local communities didn't need scientific proof. In Sulphur Bay and surrounding villages, these orbs were part of everyday life. Children were warned not to follow them into the jungle. Elders shared stories of owl-white beings who moved through Mount Yasur's heart. Some accounts were deeply rooted in local mythology. One chief claimed the orbs had protected their ancestors from colonial invaders. The stories varied. Some villagers believed the lights only appeared during specific moon phases or when visitors from certain lands were present. Whispers suggested foreign soldiers during World War II had encountered them too, with rumors of covered-up sightings. Intriguingly, the most credible accounts came from tour guides who escorted tourists to the crater. Despite seeing the orbs dozens of times, they still gasped with wonder at each appearance. Scientific attempts to document these phenomena yielded mixed results. In 2011, a German research team brought advanced video equipment, sensors, and thermal imaging tools. Over 3 weeks, they recorded several eruptions but failed to capture an orb. On their final night, a guide named Kip convinced them to stay 1 more hour. That night, 2 pale green spheres appeared inside the crater. The archived footage shows the lights hovering just above the magma for nearly 45 seconds before fading without a trace. Thermal readings revealed no abnormal heat signature from the orbs, a pattern that left scientists perplexed. Plasma typically generates immense heat, yet these lights seemed immune to combustion rules. The mystery deepened in 2012 when a Japanese NHK film crew, while interviewing villagers, accidentally recorded what became one of the most compelling pieces of evidence to date: a ball of light emerging from the volcanic landscape. Note, a silent basketball-sized orb glided past the crater's edge in broad daylight. The video captured birds scattering, a dog's bark, and then complete stillness. The local people's perspective was deeply rooted in generations of oral tradition. For them, these mysterious orbs were alive, watchers, perhaps messengers. Some elders believed the orbs emerged from inside the earth, not from space. One storyteller described the volcano as a world's womb, with the orbs representing its breath. The orb paused briefly over the crater mouth, shuddered, and then shot vertically into the clouds. While skeptics proposed explanations like ball lightning, camera artifacts, or misidentified drones, such theories lost credibility with each new sighting. No drone could survive within 1,000 volcanic gases, and no atmospheric phenomenon seemed to linger with such apparent sentience responding to people and environment. Anthropologists became increasingly interested as they discovered these oral traditions extended back generations, predating electricity and airplanes. What had these people been witnessing? Had these lights been constant companions to this fiery mountain, simply overlooked until someone took a closer look? Despite research efforts, the orbs remained elusive. They appeared unpredictably, often when no cameras were present, yet they never disappeared completely. Between 2003 and 2013, credible sightings occurred approximately every 4 to 6 months. Most intriguingly, villagers began reporting dreams preceding sightings, visions of light, strange music, or ancestral whispers from the jungle. A respected midwife claimed the orbs visited childbirth ceremonies to witness new life. While unverifiable, the frequency of similar dreams among unrelated villagers caught researchers' attention. By 2013, the sightings diminished. Some attributed this to climate changes, while others believed the volcano had simply gone quiet spiritually. The final documented sighting came from Dutch volcanologist Peter van der Mee in October 2013. While recording gas emissions on the southern slope, he witnessed an orange sphere zip down the mountainside, pass over his equipment, and vanish into the jungle canopy. His instruments detected a magnetic pulse, but no additional data. Though the events slowed, the underlying belief remained unchanged. Now, Anyasur volcano still erupts today, standing unbothered. Local guides continue watching the sky while tourists visit, and though no definitive answer has been reached, the sightings remain burned into the collective memory of those who encountered them. These experiences might be earthborne anomalies or sentient observers. Perhaps, like the volcano itself, they have always been with us, older than science, older than story, watching from the breath of the earth. On January 7, 1970, near Lake Imarvi in Finland, an extraordinary event unfolded. Esko Viljo, a 36-year-old caretaker, and his younger friend Arto Hanno, a 24-year-old mechanic, were cross-country skiing along familiar tracks. The winter afternoon was dim and cold, with snow-covered open fields marked only by 2 narrow ski tracks leading from the forest toward the frozen lake. The air was sharp enough to sting skin, and each forward push made their skis ring out against the stillness. They had made this trip many times before, with nothing suggesting this day would be different. Side by side near the lake's edge, Vilio suddenly noticed something ahead, a bright point of light against the overcast sky. Initially believing it might be a reflection or winter sun breaking through clouds, Vilio realized the light was not fading. Instead, it grew, swelling into a sphere that cut sharply through the gray atmosphere. Hanno noticed it simultaneously, slowing to watch as it descended toward them. There was no sound, no engine whine, no rotor chop, no rushing wind. The light seemed self-contained, a perfectly steady glow without flicker or haze. Within seconds, an object emerged from the glare, metallic, disc-shaped, and no larger than a small car. It hung motionless at treetop height, its surface reflecting the muted winter light in a dull silvery sheen. Suddenly, a white light shaft beamed down from its underside, striking Vilio squarely and illuminating him in the snow. He froze not by choice, but because his body no longer obeyed him. Later, he would describe the sensation as if his entire being had been suspended in an inexplicable moment. Heat enveloped Vilio like an internal wave, far more penetrating than any fire's warmth. A metallic taste filled his mouth as his vision blurred. Standing nearby, Hanno watched his companion's face, a canvas of shock, strain, and confusion. Though Hanno shouted, Vilio remained unresponsive. Time seemed to stretch during those few seconds, perhaps barely a minute. Suddenly, the beam withdrew. The disk tilted, then shot upward into the low cloud cover, vanishing without a trace. Only a faint rush of displaced air broke the silence. Vilio's legs gave way, and he collapsed onto the snow. Hanno helped him sit upright. His companion's breathing was rapid, skin flushed with complaints of weakness, dizziness, and a burning sensation in his face and hands. A sharp chemical smell hung in the cold air. Hanno would later describe it as a mix of sulfur and ozone. They decided to head back to town, with Vilio's skiing labored and movements stiff. By the time they reached home, winter darkness had fully settled. That evening, Vilio's condition deteriorated. His face became puffy, eyes bloodshot, and skin mottled with patch-like burns. A persistent headache and unquenchable thirst accompanied these symptoms. Hanno experienced only mild eye irritation that quickly subsided. Concerned, they reported the incident to local police. The next day, officers investigated the site. The snow remained largely undisturbed, save for their ski tracks. Where Vilio had stood, they discovered a shallow depression and a neat circular pattern of loose snow. No animal tracks, machinery signs, or fallen branches interrupted the scene. The case intrigued Finnish Defense Forces personnel, who made discreet inquiries. No aircraft had been reported in the area. Weather conditions were stable, overcast skies, light wind, no electrical storms that might explain the unusual atmospheric event. Doctors in Hyola would subsequently examine Vilio, puzzling over the mysterious encounter. In the days following an unusual encounter near Helsinki, medical notes surfaced among Finnish UFO researchers detailing the physical aftermath experienced by the two men. Their symptoms included skin redness, mild swelling, elevated blood pressure, and general fatigue. Despite no visible burns or blisters, skin discoloration continued for several days. Blood tests showed no critical abnormalities requiring hospitalization, and within 2 weeks, most symptoms had resolved, though Vilio reported ongoing tiredness. For Hanno, the experience was primarily a psychological shock. When speaking with police and later investigators from the Finnish UFO Research Association, both men described an identical craft, a smooth metallic disc with no visible seams, emitting a bright, concentrated light beam from underneath. Civilian investigators quickly arrived at the scene. The relatively new Finnish UFO Research Association considered this one of their most compelling close encounters. They meticulously documented the site, photographed circular snow disturbances, and took separate statements from each witness. The testimonies matched remarkably, even in minute details like the craft's departure angle and an unusual atmospheric odor. Speculation grew among researchers and locals in the following weeks. Some theorized the men had encountered an experimental Soviet drone, given Finland's Cold War proximity to the USSR. Others saw the incident as part of a growing category of UFO encounters involving physical effects from unknown light sources. The Miarvi case shared similarities with international reports from the late 1960s and early 1970s, describing hovering craft beams causing temporary paralysis and localized heating. However, this incident stood out. The witnesses were experienced outdoorsmen. The event occurred in daylight on open ground, making misidentification unlikely. By mid-1970, the incident had gained attention in UFO periodicals across Europe. The Finnish Defense Forces maintained a neutral stance, simply confirming no known aircraft were in the area at the time. Here is the rewritten version. Finnish UFO researchers consider the case one of the country's most compelling CE2 incidents. Distinguishing it through the credibility of its witnesses and the consistency of their accounts. Viljo and Hanno's testimonies remained unchanged throughout their lives, never expanding beyond their initial report. The encounter's most haunting aspect for Viljo was not the beam itself, but its apparent selectivity, targeting him while leaving Hanno untouched. Neither man could explain why. Questions lingered. Was this a deliberate observation, a scanning process, or something entirely different? After several weeks, Viljo returned to work but avoided that part of the lake for months. Hanno continued skiing, though he admitted to watching the sky more carefully than before. Both men maintained their original story with unwavering commitment. Lake Hamarvi today remains as silent as it was during that winter day. Cross-country skiers still race its frozen edges, with deep snow covering the landscape in January and a pale sun struggling through clouded skies. No trace remains on the ground of that 1970 incident, yet the accounts of Viljo and Hanno have endured in Finnish archives and international UFO literature. The case offers no simple explanations, only the stark image of a silent disk, a shaft of light, and a frozen moment that transformed an ordinary winter outing into one of Finland's most enigmatic encounters. The event remained open for a short period before being quietly closed without explanation. An object had descended from the sky, hovering just above a vehicle. Bright red lights blinked in a circular motion underneath. The dog had gone wild, leaving the woman too frightened to get out of the car or drive away. Bertrand scanned the sky, finding nothing, yet the woman's fear seemed genuine. She wasn't hysterical, but clear and composed, adamant about encountering something big and unexplainable in the air. Less than an hour later, another report came in, this time from Norman Muscarello, an 18-year-old hitchhiking home from his girlfriend's house in nearby Amesbury. While walking along Route 150 near Kensington, he spotted something in the field beside him. At first, he thought it was a house on fire. A brilliant red light pulsated in the darkness, flaring and dimming in a strange pattern. Then the shape emerged. A massive, silent object rose from behind the trees, hovering over the field. 5 powerful red lights pulsed in sequence, positioned low enough for Muscarello to see its metallic structured underside. Dropping to the ground in fear, he looked up to find the object still there, watching motionless. When it moved, drifting silently across the road, Mascarello ran toward the nearest house, pounding on the door. Finding no answer, he continued running until he reached a farmhouse and called the police. At the exit station, Officer Bertrand was startled by the teenager's state of shock. Mascarello was nearly breathless, telling a story that echoed the earlier report. Bertrand had seen UFO stories in the papers, but this wasn't a prank. Mascarello was visibly disturbed, providing precise details about the lights hovering in silence. Bertrand decided to investigate personally. He put Mascarello in the cruiser and headed back to the scene, where Officer David Hunt joined them. What happened next would change everything. As they walked into the field, flashlights sweeping the darkness, the witnesses suddenly froze. Rising over the treetops exactly as Mascarello had described was a large object with 5 bright red lights, flashing in sequence from left to right, rotating in a circular motion. The lights cast eerie shadows across the field, lighting up the trees in an unnatural glow. Then it moved, the craft beginning to drift. An unexpected sight unfolded above them. A large silent object with 5 red lights hovered without any visible means of propulsion, defying conventional explanation. Bertrand, Hunt, and Mascarello witnessed something they couldn't rationalize. Bertrand meticulously documented the incident upon returning to the station, careful not to speculate but to simply describe what he had seen. The event quickly spread, reaching Pete's Air Force Base within hours. Military investigators arrived to interview the witnesses. Initially, officials suggested the sighting was a formation of B-47 bombers. However, the witnesses immediately rejected this explanation. Bertrand, a trained observer and veteran, emphasized that planes don't hover silently or flash red lights in a rotating pattern. Hunt and Mascarello echoed his sentiments. The Air Force's next theory involved temperature inversion, causing misidentified celestial objects. This explanation only further frustrated the witnesses. What they saw was clearly a structured craft with deliberate movement, not a misunderstood star or planet. Civilian UFO researchers from the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP, began their own investigation. They discovered additional witnesses who reported similar experiences in the area. Residents near the exit described glowing lights, objects hovering over power lines, and silent discs moving in ways unlike any known aircraft. Some witnesses reported more extraordinary details: lights peering into windows, panicked animals, and vehicles inexplicably stalling. Despite the Air Force's continued stance of misidentification, the case refused to disappear. What made this incident remarkable was the credibility of its witnesses. 2 trained police officers and a civilian teenager provided independent yet consistent accounts. There was no exaggeration, no seeking of fame. Just an unexplained and unforgettable encounter that challenged existing understanding of aerial phenomena. The Extor incident remains one of the most compelling UFO encounters in American history, not because of sensational sci-fi tropes, but because of its stark simplicity and the credibility of those involved. 3 men witnessed something they couldn't explain, and they were brave enough to report it. Despite attempts to rewrite, downplay, or dismiss their story, their testimony never changed. They never claimed to know exactly what they saw, only that something was definitely there. This case gained significant attention, becoming a centerpiece of civilian pressure on the government to take UFO sightings more seriously. The Condon Committee, a scientific panel assigned by the U.S. Air Force to study UFO reports, even briefly mentioned it in their final report, though without reaching a definitive conclusion. Years later, Bertrand and Hunt remained consistent in their interviews. Neither man ever altered a word of his original statement or offered alternative explanations. Bertrand once stated emphatically, "I'll never forget what I saw, and I know what I saw was real. The field where the sighting occurred still exists, just off Route 150, surrounded by woods." Locals are familiar with the story, and some claim to have experienced strange phenomena in recent years, unexplained lights and sounds where none should be. In a strikingly similar vein, another remarkable encounter unfolded in Kira, Kuchi Prefecture, Japan, in September 1972. A group of boys experienced something extraordinary that would challenge their understanding of the world. "Look over here," one boy shouted, his voice wavering between excitement and fear. As they turned, expecting perhaps a frog or a piece of tin, they instead froze in their tracks. There, nestled in the grass, sat a small metallic object no larger than a soup bowl. Its dome-shaped top glimmered softly in the afternoon sunlight, with a darker underside that seemed to pulse with an unknown energy. For a breathless moment, the object remained motionless, almost beckoning the boys closer. Hesitantly, one boy stepped forward, and the others followed. Suddenly, the object stirred. It tilted, spun on its axis, and lifted silently into the air. The children watched in awe as it hovered just above their heads, gliding in an arc as if observing them. Then, with startling speed, it shot across the path and vanished. The boys stumbled after it, but it was gone, leaving behind only a neat circle of flattened grass. Later, one of them would tell a local reporter, "It was small, but it moved like it knew exactly where to go. When we tried to catch it, it ran away from us." That first glimpse lasted less than a minute, but it was just the beginning. A few days later, while walking home from school, the boys would encounter the craft once more. Their village. A group of boys spotted something unusual. They tried to circle the object, which suddenly rose straight up, hovered briefly, and darted east. The encounters continued over 2 weeks, with the object consistently behaving in strange ways. When the boys approached, it would lift off. When they stopped, it stopped. One boy described it as if the object was easing them. During these encounters, the object demonstrated remarkable behavior. Once, when they threw a cloth over it, the fabric bulged upward before the object wriggled free and shot skyward. Another time, a boy trapped it in his school satchel, only to watch it jerk upward and slip away. "It was light," he said, "but when we tried to hold it, it moved by itself, like it wanted to escape." The sightings occurred both in daylight and at dusk, with the object sometimes emitting a faint glow while spinning. It became the center of the boys' afternoons, with school ending and them rushing to the fields, convinced the craft was waiting. Initially, no one believed them. Parents dismissed their stories, with one father claiming they watched too much TV. But the children remained consistent. Their teacher noticed their restlessness and asked them to describe the object in class. Each child gave the same description: a silver dome, silent, no larger than a bowl, moving with deliberate precision. The teacher later recalled how uniform their accounts were, believing they were not fabricating the story. Other villagers began to take notice. A farmer claimed to see a small flickering light darting above the pastures. Reactions varied. Some teased the children, while others felt uneasy. One villager noted, if it happened once, maybe they imagined it, but they kept seeing it in the same place. That's harder to ignore. Families became divided. Some wanted the boys to stay quiet to avoid ridicule, while others cautiously believed them. One mother told a reporter, "He has never lied to me before." Officers questioned the boys, searched the pastures, and examined flattened grass patches. They found nothing, but were struck by the children's consistency. Even when interviewed separately, one policeman admitted, "The children are sincere," but there is no physical proof. We can only say they are not lying. The notebook recorded only children report small flying object. No evidence found. Rumors spread quickly after the Kuchi Nishimun published an article under the headline, "School children report strange flying object." The story of the boys was no longer just idle chatter among friends. They were now providing testimony about something extraordinary. Their account described a saucer-like object, no bigger than a hat. It spun quickly and emitted a strange light when it rose. Other newspapers in Shikoku quickly picked up the story, with reporters interviewing villagers and staking out fields at night. One journalist claimed a brief glimpse of a faint silver flicker, though unable to confirm details. By the mid-1970s, UFO researchers in Japan had begun documenting the Kira case in their newsletters. English-language journals started noting it as one of the strangest incidents on record. A group of children repeatedly encountering a miniature disc that seemed to respond to them. The involvement of the Japan self-defense forces remained unclear. Some researchers believed military channels must have been informed, especially during the heightened Cold War vigilance. If any inquiry occurred, it was never made public. By autumn's end, police files were closed, reporters moved on, and officials fell silent. The encounters left a lasting impact on the boys. At school, they drew domes in their notebooks. Classmates responded with mockery or intense curiosity, pressing them to retell their story. Home became a battleground of belief, with parents wanting the subject dropped while the boys remained adamant about their experience. Years later, one boy reflected, "Our parents told us to forget it, but how could we forget something like that? We touched it. We knew it was real." Villagers carried a lingering unease. Farmers joked about the toy saucer but grew uncomfortable when pressed for details. Teachers remembered the boys' steady testimony. Japan's folklore added depth to the narrative. Rural communities had long spoken of Hidodama, ghostly lights floating across fields, and fishermen told tales of sea lanterns rising from water. To some, the boys' story resonated with these traditional legends. Yet their descriptions were distinctly mechanical, metallic, spinning, deliberate. It was folklore transformed into machinery. The 1970s were a decade of growing UFO fascination in Japan. Translated books and magazines popularized saucer accounts, while small UFO associations emerged. By winter, other stories had filled the papers, and the Kira craft faded from public view, preserved only in the files of dedicated researchers. Not Chi-Chi Prefecture, daily life was steeped in farming rhythms, far from science fiction. Yet something extraordinary pierced that routine. Children spoke of a strange sight. Parents recalled ghostly tales, and reporters framed it as a miniature saucer. Skeptics rushed to offer explanations. Some argued the boys mistook a toy or balloon. Others accused them of fabrication, but their accounts remained eerily consistent. They described a metallic disc that hovered, darted, and seemed to resist capture. No ordinary object could explain their story. Balloons didn't lift satchels from cloth traps. Toy models lacked the precision they described. Remote-controlled devices existed in 1972, but were rare and couldn't perform the movements witnessed. Weather balloons drifted passively. Nothing like the boys' sketches. Decades later, when interviewed as adults, their testimony remained unchanged. The children had grown, harvests came and went, and the story faded from headlines. But the memory persisted for those who experienced it. One participant reflected, "It was small like a toy, but alive. It moved as if it understood us." What made the Kira incident remarkable was the children's unwavering narrative. Unlike typical childhood accounts that shift or exaggerate, their stories stood firm. Researchers found it a quiet puzzle, not a mass sighting with scientific validation, but a subtle encounter, tangible enough to touch, yet impossible to capture. Authorities logged and then dismissed it. Newspapers gave it minimal coverage. But for the boys, it remained a lived experience. What was this tiny craft? A prank, an unknown device, or something entirely different? No conclusion was ever reached. no definitive evidence emerged. Only the testimony of children who briefly encountered a mystery remained. Sometimes the unknown doesn't arrive with dramatic fanfare. Sometimes it approaches small, playful, and silent, hovering above the rice fields before vanishing into darkness. The Clan Lake Incident, June 18, 1960. Clan Lake, located roughly 30 kilometers north of Yellowknife, was a hub for mineral exploration. Its deep blue waters, nestled among boreal forests and ancient stone, made it an attractive site for prospectors. On June 18th, around 3:15 p.m., two independent prospectors, Gerald Hawthorne and Robert Spracklin, experienced something extraordinary that would defy explanation. As they were concluding their day's work, a sudden sound caught their attention. Spracklin described it as a thud, similar to a large log hitting the lake's surface. Turning toward the water, they initially saw only ripples. Then, approximately 200 yards from shore, a peculiar object appeared. Unlike typical water entries, this circular object descended directly from above, creating minimal disturbance. The men observed a metallic, smooth silver disc about 5 feet in diameter, devoid of markings, wings, or visible propulsion. Hawthorne would later tell investigators that the object seemed to descend weightlessly, as if guided by an invisible force. After entering the water, the lake quickly returned to its previous calm state. These were not inexperienced men prone to wild imagination. Both Hawthorne and Spracklin were seasoned outdoorsmen familiar with wilderness challenges, bears, harsh weather, and equipment failures, yet this encounter was unlike anything they had previously experienced. That evening, they meticulously documented the incident in their camp log. The following morning, they flew to Yellowknife and reported their sighting to the local RCMP detachment. Constable Brian Wilkie interviewed them separately, finding their accounts remarkably consistent and noting their credible demeanor. Wilkie's report, released decades later through an access to information request, stated that no conventional aircraft matching the object's description was reported in the area. The RCMP subsequently forwarded the case to the Department of National Defense in Ottawa. What transpired after this point remains shrouded in mystery. 3 days after the report's filing, events unfolded that were never formally disclosed to the public, leaving the incident at Clan Lake an enduring enigma. A military hydrographic team requested charter transport to Clan Lake, according to an airport staff. Log dated June 21st, though the requester's name was not disclosed. The flight was officially recorded. Hawthorne and Spracklin continued their work at their camp, unaware of any ongoing investigation. On June 22nd, events took an unusual turn. A float plane circled Clan Lake, landing at the opposite shore. 4 men stepped out, dressed in plain clothing but carrying crates marked with stenciled numbers. One of these men approached the prospectors' camp, asking quiet but pointed questions. He inquired about their duration at the site, whether they had observed any unusual debris, and if they possessed diving equipment. Spracklin noted something peculiar. One of the men mentioned subsurface scans, a term unfamiliar to him. The group's visit was brief, lasting no more than 2 hours, and they never explained their purpose. By June 24th, the mysterious group departed. The prospectors remained for another 2 weeks before abandoning their stake due to equipment failure. Years later, in 1981, the incident gained renewed interest when Canadian UFO researcher Chris Kowski obtained partial RCMP and D&D files. The documents, though heavily redacted, contained intriguing details. One note referred to the object as an aerial anomaly with subaqueous termination. A D&D officer's field assessment dated July 7, 1960 stated bluntly, "No trace of aircraft wreckage found, no civilian or military flight plans matched the description. No further action required." With no debris or radar data, the case went cold. What stood out was the quiet, coordinated military presence. Flights were booked, Lake scans performed and inquiries made, all without official announcement. Kowski later described it as a textbook case of early Cold War protocol, a real incident investigated and then buried. Locally, nothing seemed to have happened. No newspapers ran the story. The RCMP archived the report, and the Department of National Defense filed it under non-hostile unknowns. Yet among researchers, Clan Lake remains one of Canada's most credible submerged object sightings. Its lack of sensationalism makes it compelling. The witnesses had no reason to fabricate their account, seeking neither media attention nor drama. Spracklen passed away in 1989, and Hawthorne, interviewed before his death in 1995, remained consistent about what they experienced. A retired Department of Transport employee provided intriguing details decades later. In a 2002 letter to the Canadian UFO Survey, he noted internal memos expressing concern about a potential foreign surveillance platform. The descent profile didn't match known balloon or drone dynamics, and an internal note used the term controlled drop. No such technology was known to exist in 1960. Unlike typical UFO reports involving dramatic encounters, the Clan Lake event sits quietly in historical records, unprovoked, unpublicized, and unresolved. It represents part of a larger tapestry of Canadian sightings that were quietly documented, occasionally investigated, and often shelved. There's no monument at Clan Lake, just a faint historical ripple and the memory of two men who stood by their story. In 2016, a private civilian research expedition attempted to revisit the site using SIDCAN sonar. Weather conditions limited their search, and while they reported unusual sonar reflections in a lakebed section, they lacked resources for deeper investigation. The official stance remains unchanged. No confirmed object, no further inquiry. Yet, among researchers, the Clan Lake incident carries weight. It reminds us that not all sightings involve dramatic chases or flashing lights. Some arrive silently, leave without warning, and settle in overlooked spaces. When two men intimately familiar with the land and lake assert something unnatural descended that day, dismissal becomes challenging. Some simply drift from mysterious skies into cold northern waters, vanishing as if to say, "You weren't meant to find me."